You are probably spending somewhere around $3,000 a year just on gasoline. Think about that for a second. $3,000. That is a vacation. That is a car payment. That is money disappearing into thin air every single time you pull up to a pump. And here is what nobody is telling you. A massive chunk of that money is not being burned because of your car. It is being burned because of how you drive it. For decades, drivers in Japan have been using a specific system that consistently slashes fuel costs by 20 to 30%. Not by buying expensive new vehicles, not by installing aftermarket parts, not by switching to electric, just by driving differently. And the most maddening part of this whole story is that it is not even a secret. It has been documented, tested, and promoted by the Japanese government since 2003. It works. The data is overwhelming, and almost nobody in America has heard of it. I'm going to walk you through exactly how this system works, technique by technique, with the real numbers behind each one. Stay until the end, because the last technique is the one that most people never figure out on their own, and it might be the most valuable thing you learn about driving in your entire life. Let me give you some background first, because understanding where this came from makes it click faster. Japan is a country that has always been acutely aware of its dependence on imported energy. With virtually no domestic oil supply, fuel efficiency is not just a personal finance issue there. It is a national priority. So in the early 2000s, the Japanese Ministry of the Environment did something unusual. They took the driving habits of the most fuel-efficient drivers in the country, the people who were naturally getting extraordinary mileage out of ordinary cars, and they reverse engineered exactly what those drivers were doing differently. Then they turned it into a teachable system, backed it with government funding, and pushed it into driving schools, corporate fleets, and public awareness campaigns nationwide. They called it eco-driving. Toyota built it into their driver training curriculum. Honda incorporated it into fleet management programs. Nissan used it as the foundation for their fuel efficiency coaching systems. Independent testing across tens of thousands of real-world drivers consistently showed fuel consumption dropping by 20 to 30%. Not in a lab, on actual roads, in actual traffic, with actual people who learned the system and applied it. Meanwhile, in America, we are still driving like we are auditioning for a Fast and Furious sequel and then expressing genuine shock at the gas station. So let's fix that. Here is the complete system, broken down into the 7 core techniques, starting with the one that delivers results the fastest. The first technique is something Japanese driving instructors call the 5-second acceleration rule, and it is probably the single most impactful change you can make starting on your very next drive. The concept is almost embarrassingly simple. When you pull away from a stop, take a full 5 seconds to reach 20 miles per hour. That is it. Just count slowly to 5 while you ease onto the gas. Most American drivers do the exact opposite. They accelerate as hard as the car will allow, rush up to speed, and then brake hard at the next light or stop sign. It feels productive. It feels like you're getting somewhere. It accomplishes almost nothing except draining your fuel tank faster than almost any other driving behavior. Here is what the US Department of Energy actually measured when they studied aggressive versus gentle acceleration. Hard acceleration burns up to 33% more fuel than smooth, gradual acceleration. 1/3 of your fuel budget gone just because you wanted to get to the next red light a few seconds earlier. When you frame it that way, it sounds almost absurd, and it is. The Japanese government ran a large-scale study on this specific technique across 10,000 drivers in real traffic conditions. The average fuel improvement from adopting the 5-second rule alone was 11%. One technique, 11%. At today's gas prices, for the average American driver, that translates to roughly $25 back in your pocket every single month. That is $300 a year from doing literally nothing except pressing the gas pedal a little more gently. There is also a secondary benefit that most people do not think about. Gentle acceleration dramatically reduces wear on your drivetrain, your transmission, your tires, and your brakes. The fuel savings are real and immediate, but the reduction in mechanical wear adds another layer of financial benefit that compounds over time. Some mechanics will tell you that driving style has a bigger impact on long-term vehicle costs than almost any other factor within the driver's control. The Japanese approach optimizes for both simultaneously. The second technique is called anticipation driving, and this is where the system starts to feel less like a tip and more like a complete philosophy of how to interact with the road. Japanese eco-drivers are trained to look 12 to 15 seconds ahead of their vehicle at all times, not just at the bumper in front of them, but at everything happening down the road. The traffic light 3 blocks up, the brake lights rippling through the intersection ahead, the delivery truck that is clearly about to pull out, the school zone you are approaching. All of it constantly being processed, so that your foot almost never needs to touch the brake pad unless there is a genuine emergency. The reasoning is straightforward once you hear it. Every time you brake, you are destroying momentum that you already paid for with fuel. Your engine burned gasoline to accelerate that car to its current speed. When you brake unnecessarily, you are converting all of that stored kinetic energy into heat and throwing it away. Then you have to burn more fuel to rebuild that momentum. When you look at it in those terms, every unnecessary brake application is literally burning money twice. The Eco Driving Promotion Network in Japan studied this behavior specifically in urban driving conditions and found that anticipation driving alone reduced fuel consumption by 8 to 12% in city traffic. That is on top of the savings from gentle acceleration. Add those together and you are already approaching 20% reduction from just 2 behavioral changes. A real-world example that puts this in perspective. A mid-sized Japanese taxi company decided to implement these 2 techniques across their entire fleet of 500 vehicles. No new cars, no mechanical changes, just driver training on gentle acceleration and anticipation. Their annual fuel bill dropped by $1.2 million. Same roads, same passengers, same drivers, different habits. The interesting psychological shift that happens when you start driving this way is that you become calmer behind the wheel. Anticipation driving naturally reduces the anxiety and frustration that comes from reactive driving because you are always a few steps ahead of what is happening. You stop being surprised by traffic situations and start expecting them. Many people who adopt this system report that driving becomes noticeably less stressful within the first week. Technique 3 is called pulse and glide, and I want to spend some extra time here because this one sounds wrong the first time you hear it. But the physics behind it are completely solid. Instead of maintaining constant steady pressure on the accelerator to hold a consistent speed, you accelerate slightly above your target speed, maybe 3 to 5 miles per hour above it, then completely release the throttle and let the car coast naturally back down below your target speed. Then accelerate again and repeat the cycle. Pulse up, glide down, pulse up, glide down. Your immediate reaction might be that this is less efficient because you are constantly speeding up and slowing down rather than holding a steady pace. That reaction makes intuitive sense. It is also wrong, and here is why. Internal combustion engines are not equally efficient at all load levels. They have an efficiency sweet spot, a range of operation where they are converting the most fuel energy into actual motion. Constant low load cruising, where your engine is just barely working to overcome air resistance and friction, keeps the engine outside that sweet spot. Short bursts of stronger acceleration push the engine into its efficient operating range, followed by coast periods where it consumes almost nothing. The net result on flat roads is 15 to 20% better fuel economy than steady-state cruising. Toyota engineers discovered this while developing the original Prius. They found that drivers who had mastered pulse and glide could exceed the Prius's EPA fuel economy rating by 20 to 40%. Let that number sit for a moment. The EPA rating is supposed to represent real-world performance. Skilled technique exceeded it by 40%. One documented case from Japan involved a driver who achieved 94 miles per gallon in a standard Prius. The EPA rating for that same vehicle was 57 miles per gallon. He nearly doubled it through driving technique alone. Obviously, most people are not going to go full hypermiler and optimize every single mile, but even a casual application of pulse and glide on appropriate roads, particularly flat highway sections with light traffic, can deliver meaningful and measurable savings. Technique 4 is the cold start protocol, and this one is going to challenge something that a lot of people genuinely believe is helping their car. The standard American cold weather routine goes something like this. Walk outside, start the car, go back inside for 5 to 10 minutes while it warms up, then drive. This feels responsible. It feels like you are protecting your engine. Modern automotive engineering disagrees with you entirely. Carbureted engines from the 1970s and earlier genuinely needed extended warm-up periods because the fuel delivery system required a specific operating temperature to mix fuel and air correctly. Modern fuel-injected engines, which includes essentially every car sold in the last 30 years, do not have this limitation. The fuel injection computer adjusts the mixture automatically from the moment you start the car. Extended idling does not warm up a modern engine more effectively than light driving does. In fact, it does the opposite. An engine warms up significantly faster under light load than it does sitting at idle. What idling does accomplish is burning approximately half a gallon of fuel per hour while going absolutely nowhere. A 10-minute warm-up routine burns roughly a third of a quart of gasoline. Do that every cold morning for a year, and you have wasted between $150 and $200 on fuel that moved your car exactly 0 feet. Japanese eco-driving replaces the idling habit with a 30-second rule. Start the engine, wait 30 seconds, then drive gently for the first 2 or 3 miles. The engine reaches operating temperature faster, the fuel injection system handles the transition seamlessly, and you have not burned $1 of fuel before moving an inch. The Japanese Ministry of Environment ran the national math on this. If every driver in Japan simply reduced unnecessary idling by 5 minutes per day, the country would collectively save the equivalent of 370 million gallons of fuel annually. 5 minutes. 370 million gallons. The scale of waste hidden in routine habits is genuinely difficult to wrap your head around. Technique 5 is about speed selection, and there's a specific number here that your driver's education teacher almost certainly never mentioned. Every vehicle has a speed range where its engine and aerodynamics are working together most efficiently. For the vast majority of passenger cars on the road today, that range sits somewhere between 35 and 50 miles per hour. Not 65, not 70, 35 to 50. Above 50 miles per hour, aerodynamic drag becomes the dominant force working against your vehicle, and it does not scale linearly, it scales with the square of your speed. That means doubling your speed quadruples the aerodynamic force your engine has to overcome. Going from 55 miles per hour to 65 miles per hour increases fuel consumption by approximately 15%. Going from 55 to 75 miles per hour increases it by roughly 25%. Japanese expressways have lower speed limits than American interstates, and while there are multiple reasons for this, one documented benefit is that average highway speeds in Japan sit much closer to the efficiency sweet spot for typical passenger vehicles. The average American highway cruising speed of 75 to 80 miles per hour is operating well into the territory of significant aerodynamic penalty. This does not mean you should drive dangerously slowly on highways. Traffic flow and safety always come first. But it does mean that if your commute or regular driving gives you the choice between a 55 mile per hour route and a 70 mile per hour route, and the time difference is modest, the fuel economics favor the slower road by a significant margin. Over a year of regular commuting, that choice alone can save several $100s. There's also a fascinating psychological component to this. Studies in both Japan and Europe have found that drivers who adopt a speed-conscious approach to highway driving report lower overall stress levels during commutes, fewer close calls, and better reaction times to unexpected road events. The economic benefit and the safety benefit are pointing in the same direction. Technique 6 is the weight audit, and this one requires you to go out to your car after reading this and actually open your trunk. The engineering relationship between vehicle weight and fuel consumption is well established. Every additional 100 pounds in your car reduces fuel economy by approximately 1 to 2%. That does not sound alarming until you take inventory of what the average American is actually hauling around every single day. Researchers studying this for the Japanese eco-driving program found that the average vehicle was carrying about 45 pounds of completely unnecessary items. Gym bags that have not seen a gym in 3 months, tools that live in the trunk permanently, sports equipment for a sport you played twice last year, cases of bottled water that have been rolling around since last summer, random stuff that accumulates because nobody ever thinks to take it out. 45 pounds of unnecessary cargo costs roughly 1% in fuel economy. Calculated over 15,000 miles of annual driving at current fuel prices, that is 7 to 10 gallons of gas per year burned for no reason whatsoever. The financial impact is modest on its own, but it is free money waiting to be reclaimed just by spending 5 minutes cleaning out your trunk. Roof racks are a dramatically more significant factor. An empty roof rack, just the rack itself with nothing on it, increases aerodynamic drag by 10 to 25%, depending on the design and your speed. A cargo box that stays mounted year-round because taking it on and off feels like a hassle? You are paying an invisible fuel surcharge of 5 to 15% on every single gallon of gas you buy. For a driver spending $3,000 a year on fuel, that cargo box might be costing an extra $200 to $400 annually just sitting there on your roof. The Japanese approach includes this weight audit as a regular part of vehicle ownership, not a one-time thing. Quarterly checks of what is in the car, what is mounted on it, and whether all of it actually needs to be there. The cumulative savings from this habit are real even when each individual item seems trivial. Technique 7 is the one that the Japanese government identified as having the largest single impact on fuel consumption. And it involves something your car is already doing that you're probably working against every single day. In any modern fuel-injected vehicle, when you completely lift your foot off the accelerator while the car is still in gear and moving, the fuel injectors shut off entirely. Not reduce flow, not idle, off. The wheels are spinning, which keeps the drivetrain turning, which keeps the engine rotating, which satisfies all the mechanical requirements of engine operation without needing any fuel whatsoever. You are traveling, your engine is running, and your fuel consumption is literally zero. This is called deceleration fuel cut, and it has been a standard feature of fuel injection systems for decades. Almost nobody in America drives in a way that takes advantage of it. Contrast this with what happens when you put the car in neutral and coast. In neutral, the drivetrain is disconnected, the wheels no longer drive the engine, and the engine management system switches to idle mode to keep the engine running on its own. Idle fuel consumption is not zero. Your engine now needs fuel to keep itself running. Coasting in neutral, which feels more intuitive and which many drivers do deliberately thinking they are saving fuel, is actually less efficient than coasting in gear with your foot off the gas. Japanese eco-drivers maximize deceleration fuel cut by starting the deceleration process dramatically earlier than typical drivers. Stop, sign 500 feet ahead, foot off the gas right now, red light 2 blocks up and already red, throttle closed immediately. The goal is to cover as much ground as possible during the free travel phase before any braking becomes necessary. A Japanese transportation research study measured how much of total driving time is spent in deceleration across typical urban and suburban routes. The answer was approximately 30%. Nearly a third of all driving time is spent either decelerating or coasting toward a stop. If you optimize that 30% of your driving with proper in-gear coasting technique, you are getting free travel for a substantial portion of every single trip you take. The study calculated this at 7 to 9% total fuel savings from deceleration optimization alone, independent of all the other techniques. Now let's put the complete picture together, because the real power of this system is not any single technique. It is how they interact. Gentle acceleration captures about 11%. Anticipation driving adds 8 to 12%. Pulse and glide on appropriate roads delivers 10 to 15% more. Eliminating unnecessary idling recovers 3 to 5%. Speed optimization, where it is practical and safe, saves 5 to 10%. Weight reduction and aerodynamic cleanup contribute 1 to 2%. Deceleration optimization adds 7 to 9%. These savings are not perfectly additive because there is natural overlap between some of them, particularly anticipation driving and deceleration optimization, since they both influence how you approach stops and slowdowns. The Japanese government's real-world testing across large populations of drivers who adopted the complete system consistently showed total improvements of 20 to 30% in actual fuel consumption. For the average American driver covering 13,500 miles annually in a car getting 25 miles per gallon, that is somewhere between $550 and $850 back in their pocket every single year. That is money that does not require a single dollar of investment. No new vehicle, no modifications, no subscriptions, just a different way of operating the machine you already own. The cultural gap between Japan and the United States on this issue is worth examining honestly, because understanding it explains why this information is not already everywhere in America. In Japan, eco-driving is embedded in the culture of vehicle ownership. Driving schools teach it as standard curriculum. The government runs public awareness campaigns around it. Major employers offer financial incentives to employees who demonstrate fuel-efficient driving habits, tracked through telematics systems installed in company vehicles. There is genuine social status attached to driving efficiently in the same way that some American drivers get status from acceleration and top speed. American driving culture runs almost directly counter to all of this. Aggressive acceleration is read as a sign of a powerful car and a confident driver. Gentle acceleration is misread as hesitancy or incompetence. Our roads, our car advertising, our entire automotive cultural framework glorifies speed and performance over efficiency and precision. We buy the largest vehicles we can justify, drive them as aggressively as traffic allows, and then express frustration at fuel costs as though they were an external force acting on us rather than a direct consequence of our choices. The irony that Japanese automakers export these efficient vehicles to America, while American drivers immediately neutralize their efficiency advantages through driving habits, is something that deserves more attention than it gets. There is also a mechanical reality here that explains something many American drivers have noticed without fully understanding it. Japanese automakers tend to test their vehicles with drivers who have been trained in eco-driving techniques. Their fuel economy numbers reflect performance under skilled operation. American drivers test the same cars with the aggressive driving habits that our culture normalizes and then get significantly worse real-world numbers, leading to widespread perception that manufacturer fuel economy ratings are inflated or dishonest. In reality, the gap between the rating and the American driver's experience is largely a gap in driving technique. A skilled eco-driver in a 10-year-old Honda Civic with 150,000 miles on it will consistently beat an aggressive driver in a brand new Prius in real-world fuel economy. The driver matters more than the vehicle. This has been demonstrated repeatedly and is not particularly controversial among automotive engineers or fuel economy researchers. It is simply not something that sells cars, so it never becomes part of the conversation around fuel efficiency at the consumer level. Before you spend $40,000 on a new vehicle because your current one is too expensive to fuel, spend 1 week implementing these 7 techniques. Track your fuel consumption before and after. The improvement will be real, it will be measurable, and it will happen without you spending a single dollar or making a single change to the car itself. The Japanese method is not complicated, it is not high-tech. It is not asking you to sacrifice convenience or safety or enjoyment of driving. It is asking you to understand the physics of how your car actually uses energy, respect those physics, and make small, deliberate adjustments that align your driving habits with how engines, aerodynamics, and momentum actually work. Every time you hammer the gas pedal to beat someone to a red light, you are paying extra money to arrive at the same destination at the same time. Every time you let unnecessary cargo sit in your trunk for 6 months, you are burning fuel to move weight that serves no purpose. Every time you coast in neutral thinking you're being efficient, you're actually burning more fuel than if you had left the car in gear. These are correctable mistakes, and correcting them costs nothing except a small amount of attention. The pump does not care about your driving culture. Physics does not care about your car's horsepower rating. The only question is whether you want to keep leaving hundreds of dollars on the table every year, or whether you want to drive the way the data actually supports. The choice is yours every single time you start the car.